The diehards are out.
I'll bring it with me. I did a presentation at Shawnee and like a blizzard started just before I did it, and so we only got 3 people that came out to it. I have to go back and redo it because so many people call afterwards like, "When's the makeup date for that?"
Was it again?
Yes, I could do one.
All right, we good to go? You hear me okay? A little mic check. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone who's here in person, and welcome everybody who's here virtually. In person, I just want the folks online to know we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 13 or 14 people here in person, and online we've got, how many, Cardi? 2 or 3? He's not paying attention to me. A few. This is, I think, our 5th go around here at doing these live and on our YouTube channel, and we appreciate everybody and their patience that you've had as we're learning it. Every time we learn a little bit more, you'll notice it's the younger employees of the museum are back there behind the controls, so they're great. I do also want to put you on the spot, but I want to. You all have seen Cardi. You've met Cardi back there. With Cardi is Katie. She's our new director of events and tourism. She just started last week, and so she's learning all of the different things here. So you'll start to see her a lot more frequently. Announcements about things that are upcoming. Again, we do have lots of different Discovering History speakers coming up this year. There's several months that there are multiple. There's months where maybe the first Friday we don't have anyone, but the other ones we do. Katie and I are working on getting all of those uploaded to the website for you. But we've tried to make sure that those align with the America 250 Ohio monthly themes as best we can. So that's an exciting thing we have going on. You also probably know that we're the executive producer of One Vote the Musical. That will be on the stage at Marietta College this July. So we're really excited to bring that story back to really where the interest of it started, which is at Special Collections Library at Marietta College. We're excited about that part. So without any further ado, Philip and I happened to meet at another America 250 Ohio project, which was the Lake Erie to Ohio River Trails. You probably know there's the Transportation Trail. I don't know.
Innovation, transportation,
creativity.
creativity.
There's several of them. He's from the Athens area. Of course, you know where I'm from. And the kickoff for it was up at Lake Erie last spring or something. We joked that we were the only 2 people that day who actually saw both the Ohio River and Lake Erie in the same day that day. But we really started talking there about ODNR and history and the great interest in it here. And I always brag about the great audiences that we have here. So Philip's talk today, the title is Stewarding History, ODNR's Role in Protecting Ohio's Cultural Heritage. So without any more, I'll let you take it away, Philip.
Hey, thank you, guys. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate all of you braving the weather to come out today. I was telling some of you earlier that I kind of like when there's like bad weather or technology issues, because then I've got to build an excuse. If I don't do well, I can just say, oh, it was the technology. And then if I do well, you all are like, wow, he made it through. So there's my built-in reason why things just didn't work today. But no, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about ODNR. I'm going to go without my notes. We're just going to kind of have a chat. I'm going to try to move through a lot of stuff quickly so we can get into time to talk a little bit more as a group. So as Aaron said, my name is Philip Hutchison. I'm a historical resources program manager at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And we're kind of a new unit that was started under this particular director and governor who have had a lot of interest in bringing more history and cultural heritage to ODNR. In quite a few states, their state historical agency and their DNR are in the same house. They're the same agency or connected. And that's different in Ohio. We're actually, I believe, the only state in the United States who has a non-government agency for our state historical agency, because Ohio History Connection is a nonprofit. So it's a little bit of a unique tapestry here. We're going to talk a little bit about cultural heritage, how we work to preserve it, protect it, interpret it. To me, that's all kind of the same thing. So let's go ahead and move on here. Here's our title. This is a photo of the Civilian Conservation Corps working in what is now Shawnee State Park and Forest in the 1930s, and there was a lot of Civilian Conservation Corps work across our system. So that's something we can talk about more later if you'd like to. So the mission of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources is to ensure a balance between the wise use and protection of our natural resources for the benefit of all. I think that it can be broadly defined. To me, natural resources also include cultural resources. So I think it's exciting that we have a team now that's dedicated to that at ODNR. So historical preservation, I'm sure all of you have your own definitions for it, but it's practices that seek to safeguard and maintain buildings, structures, sites, or objects of historical, cultural, or architectural significance. And I think it's also, educating people about those things as well. So how does ODNR fit into this picture? Everything we do is kind of through a lens of public history, because we're a public agency. Our whole reason for existing is to do things in a way that will benefit the most Ohio citizens as possible, while still, preserving those for the future as well. So to benefit Ohio citizens now and into the future. So public history, promotes experiential connections between the past, present, and future. It's education. It's what we're doing here, going out, talking to the public. It's not so much the academic study of history. So at ODNR, some of those things include historical interpretation, historical sites and structures, collaboration across different agencies and entities, and the natural areas of the state in and of themselves. And we'll talk a little more later about how I view that as a huge part of historical preservation. We're going to start talking about interpretation though. This is what I do the most of, mostly at my job, is write interpretive panels, prepare interpretive guides for naturalists who want to do more historical content, but maybe have a background in biology instead of in history. Help them develop programs and things such as that. So in interpretation, you get to contextualize research and its significance, and tell public-facing stories, which is really the fun part, is that you get to be a storyteller. You get to craft narratives and really, highlight the things that you think is important for people to take away, and do that in a way that helps them connect to it in a really personal sense. So if you do a good job as an interpreter, people leave feeling not just like they know a little bit more about what you've talked about, but like they are more a part of what you've talked about. And so that's what's most fun for me. And it also has to be accessible. To do good interpretation, you need to be able to do it for an audience of, college students, an audience of third graders, an audience at a senior citizens home, an audience of, professors in the field. You need to be able to make what you're talking about interesting to a large audience. So what I'm doing today is not interpretation, because I don't know how many people it's going to be interesting to or not. It's a little dry. We'll talk about a few little case studies. We could go into lots of them. We're going to talk some about Great Council State Park, some of our visitor centers, the Heritage of Freedom projects, and the Historical Markers program. Great Council State Park. How many of you in this room are familiar with, have heard of Great Council State Park yet? Well, if you're history people, you got to go. It's a great free experience. Just north of Xenia, Ohio, on State Route 68. In 1777, the Shawnee were moving north away from conflict, trying to put a little bit of more buffer room between them and the Virginians in Kentucky. And they, Chief Cornstalk had just been killed, and Chief Blackfish was leading the more the less pacifistic wing of the Shawnee resistance. And so he established a village on the site where this interpretive center and small state park now rests. This is actually the place where famously Daniel Boone was taken after he was captured with the other Kentucky salt boilers and then taken north and spent a few months in this area with Chief Blackfish and others. So here we have a 12,000 square foot interpretive center. It's all focused on Shawnee history, early settlement history, local, really hyper local stuff. And it's really great. We worked with Ohio History Connection. We worked with the tribes. We'll talk a little bit more about that in another section here. But it's a beautiful place to go. And one of the great things about it is because it's a state park, this is free. You're not paying to go into a museum, which I think that we can do that in ways that I'm always happy to pay to go into a museum because I want them to be able to do more exhibits and more stuff. I love museums. But here, if you don't have the money or if you're just wanting to stop in for 15 minutes, you got kids, you're like, I've got all these kids that I want to take them into this place, but we're only going to get to spend 15 or 20 minutes there and I don't want to pay for 5 people. You can go to a place like this and it's free and you can still get a really nice quality museum style experience. So here we wrote content. I wrote a lot of the first floor content. We worked with the tribes. We worked with designers to develop these exhibits. It's a great place. I recommend, go there, check it out sometime. It's really telling a story that we don't get a chance to interact with a lot in Ohio. Visitor centers. We've opened a lot of new ones recently, and they really run the gamut. They talk about the park, its geography, what recreational opportunities there are. But almost all of these visitor centers, nature centers, welcome centers, they're all called different things for whatever reason. Almost all of them have some historical elements too. And so our unit helps them develop that content in there. So a couple of them here, we have Lake Loramie State Park, which has a lot of content talking about geology, ice harvesting, some of the early history there. It's a really great place too, if you ever get a chance to go there. And then Clifton Gorge, they developed a new nature center at the Clifton Gorge Nature Preserve, and that's actually Governor DeWine in there when it opened, checking out I think he's in a couple of these pictures. We take lots of pictures as the governor. He loves their DNR. So, but there's also a lot of historical content at that Nature Preserve Nature Center. And these are another way for the public to, in small doses, to interact with historical content for free in Ohio, while also getting, finding out where's the best place to go kayaking here, where can I rent a paddle board, what's what other amenities are there at this park. So they do a really good job of blending that. This administration has been very aggressive about updating and building new visitor centers and amenities to give people more places to go in and interact with our staff and our content at our state parks and nature preserves. So Lake Loramie is near Sydney, Ohio, North Sydney, Piqua. So kind of north of Central to the west. And then Clifton Gorge is also near Xenia, real close to Cedarville, the town of Cedarville, if you're familiar with it. Yellow Springs, right outside of Yellow Springs. John Bryan State Park and Clifton Gorge used to be the same one entity, and then Clifton Gorge was split off as a nature preserve. Heritage Freedom Project. This one's one that I'm really passionate about because I've worked a lot on this. That's actually me talking to a group on one of the trails that we opened this past fall. But we've opened 3, working on funding for more. This is a project that interprets the Underground Railroad and its history in the state of Ohio. And if that's a story you guys are interested in and familiar with, you probably know that Ohio has more confirmed sites and routes on the Underground Railroad than any other state in the United States, and that some researchers estimate that as many as 50 to even 60% of all freedom seekers who made it into free territory crossed through or into the state of Ohio. So the Underground Railroad's a big deal in Ohio. And we wanted to, again, put out some free public interpretation, something that you could walk. We put these signs on short trails, like a half-mile trail, something that you could walk and read and interact with and feel a little bit of that connection by being in nature, being in the same types of places that these people would have been transiting through when they were, traveling north to look for a free life. And we also try to interpret things in a way that is uniquely ODNR. So not only do we talk about general history, some of the safe houses and the routes of the Underground Railroad, we also try to talk about how natural resources connected to the experience of a freedom seeker, medicinal plants, celestial and solar navigation, how to find clean water, how to follow a game trail to find a stream, things like that. We really tried to connect it to edible plants, to all of these things that are in our realm of natural resources. And we think that also allows people to, again, have a little more of that personal connection to something like, oh yeah, I mean, these people may have been picking blackberries along the way, just like we do every summer. So again, I think it's just another way of interpreting the past and trying to connect people to it in small, easily digestible, short doses. These are both pictures from East Fork State Park, which is just outside of Cincinnati, near like Batavia. And then we also have one of these at Alum Creek, which is in North Columbus, and another one at Portage Lake State Parks, which is in near Akron. We're hoping to open one, to open a few more if we can procure the funding for them. And one of the places on the short list for that could be Stroud's Run down in Athens. That would be the closest to here if we get one installed there. Each one contains about 6 to 7 interpretive signs, about a half-mile trail, nice short walk, chance to read some stuff. I think they're a lot of fun. We worked with the National Underground Railroad Museum Center in Cincinnati, which if you've never been there, another great museum to check out. We worked with them on content and partnered with them. A couple of their folks came, I don't think any of them are in that picture, but came for the ribbon cutting at East Fork. Then our historical marker program. This one's really great. And I think a cool connection for you guys that probably in this audience, most of you know. But all of these historical markers you see all over the place are, right here in Marietta. It's the only place around here that makes these, and they're beautiful. And we started our own marker program because we had a lot of markers we wanted to put out. And the marker program through Ohio History Connection only has so much capacity. And getting them through that was taking a long time, and because they're getting requests sent in from all over the state, and so we started our own marker program. One of my colleagues, Neil Humphrey, seen right here, is a recent PhD in natural history. He researches and writes these for us, and they're really wonderful. This one is up at Headlands Beach, talking about the birth of neutrino astronomy, because in the Morton salt mine underneath Lake Erie was the first place that neutrinos were from outside our galaxy were actually captured scientifically. It's really cool story. I recommend you checking it out sometime. You can learn some about it from here, but it's a really cool story to dive into. But we started this program back in 2021, and since then we've installed 31 of these historical markers around the state at nature preserves, state forests, state parks. I think even 1 or 2 at wildlife areas. And then we have 15 more that are awaiting installation in the next year or two. And at that point, this phase of the historical marker program will be concluded. Not saying that we won't ever make another one, but we will have concluded the list that we were going through. Great thing about historical markers is their longevity. They last under poor conditions 30 to 60 years. Under good conditions, they can go well over 100 years in usable condition. If they get damaged or something, you can send them back to the foundry and they can resurface them, or you can have new ones created. So that's some of the ways that we do interpretation. Interpretation is probably my favorite part of my job. It's where I get to interact with people. I get to do fun writing and quick little research projects, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun to me to write a 300-word, it's harder in some ways and easier in others, but to write like a 300-word interpretive panel rather than having to write a 30-page essay like I did in grad school and stuff, because it, it it makes you really have to boil things down to the things that you want people to take away from it. Um, and you can touch on so many different things. You can go from project to project instead of spending 2 months writing a small book. You can spend a week in research and a week in writing, and then get it out to get reviewed and edited and all of that good stuff, and then cut it down from, you always write it too long the first time, and you have to cut it down to get enough words that it fits on your sign. But it's a lot of fun. I really love doing interpretation. The only thing I like more than writing interpretive signage is getting to go out and do interpretive programs, especially with kids. So moving on to sites and structures, historical sites and structures, preserving them, presenting them. They're important as tangible links to the past. You can put your hand on them. You can walk through the threshold. You can set down inside them. You can build a fire in a lot of these old CCC shelter houses still. You can have a birthday party in them, or I mean, my wedding was in a CCC built structure at Lake Hope State Park in a shelter house there, and they're all over the place. Different types of these historical sites and structures at ODNR. I'm going to talk here about built structures because I'm going to talk about landscapes and stuff a little more later, but about built structures. So we're going to talk about just a few of them. Like I said, there's a lot, but I'm not going to try to focus in on every single thing. I want to get through this. So we're going to talk a little about Malabar Farm State Park, Wands Mansion, Marblehead Lighthouse, and the broad category of New Deal era sites. Most of them are Civilian Conservation Corps. Malabar Farm. If any of you have ever been to Malabar Farm near Mansfield, beautiful scenic place. I really love it. We've actually been working recently on trying to update the presentation of some of the stuff in the house. They've got so much wonderful stuff, but a lot of it was just kind of laying down. We've been just kind of trying to stand stuff up, space it out a little bit better, make it a little more organized. But it's a beautiful house. It's the home of Louis Bromfeld. If any of you are familiar with his work, I'm not a huge fan of his fiction, but I love his work in the agricultural space. If he had lived a few more years until Silent Spring came out, he would have been one of the most famous people in that movement. He was already talking about the same stuff, but he died shortly for just a few years, maybe. Not too long before Silent Spring came out, and I think he would have been much more famous than he is today had he lived long enough for that to come out, because Malabar Farm would have been a poster child for the practices that were being espoused there. The low-till and no-till farming, the different types of application of fertilizers, and this the way he worked on preventing erosion and controlling erosion, and contour farming. And it was really, he did some amazing stuff in the agricultural arena. And his house eventually passed to the state and on to ODNR, and is upkept for tours. You can go in, you can tour the house on scheduled tours. You can go into the barn on your own and tour it. It's still a working farm with some animals, not a lot, but you've got some cattle on the farm, and goats and other chickens running around, some stray cats. It's a great place though. His collected library, large portions of it, not all of it, some of it's housed at Ohio State, but large portions of the collected library are all through the house. Hundreds of original pictures and copies of original pictures of him, his family, bunch of movie stars and stuff that used to come out and hang out. And one of the fun things they tell you on the tour is that he had rules. He seems like he was kind of a grumpy guy, but he had rules. So if you came and you spent the night at Malabar Farm, you had to do chores. So I think Shirley Temple helped sell fruit at the market stand that he had, and someone else famous milked a goat And so he made them do chores, and it's a lot of fun. Another one I would recommend. Check it out sometime. It's beautiful. One of our most recent projects, if any of you are familiar with the Bass Islands, South Bass, Middle Bass, and North Bass Island. North Bass Island is almost impossible to get to, but we do have a new structure of some kind, visitor center of some kind up there as well that I've never been to. But South Bass and Middle Bass are pretty easy on the ferry. South Bass is put in Bay, and the park there, the old Victory Hotel used to be at South Bass. But at North Bass, or Middle Bass, was mostly a wine country. A lot of people don't know, but the Ohio, the Lake Erie Islands and that area was one of the first big wine boom countries in the United States. Mostly German immigrants that did winemaking. And then there's beautiful old wineries. Ruins of them are still existing, ones dotted all over the islands. But one of those was the Lawns Winery, the Lawns family. And they had this, they call it the Lawns Mansion. It's more like the Lawns Big House. But the Lawns Mansion that up until the 60s was in pretty good shape. You can see over here a picture of it from circa 1960-ish in black and white. Looks like there may be a little bit of damage I'm seeing on the roof there, but it still looks like it's habitable and in good shape. By 2023, it had fallen into pretty serious disrepair. You can see that the porch appears to have fallen off, and it's in pretty serious disrepair here. And the inside was inhabited primarily by raccoons at that point in time. I know that when my colleague went up for their first tour of it before this construction really started, he said there were just raccoon nests and physical raccoons kind of darting all over the place in here. So that was in early 2023. By fall of 2024, we had restored it to mostly original condition to the extent that we could, and refurbished the inside. Is beautiful, and it is now a space that is rentable for overnight stays. There's 3 bedrooms upstairs. The downstairs is kind of a curated space, not a lot of like display materials, but a curated space with historical furniture and such. And then the upstairs is a livable space where you can rent and stay. And so I think it's really great that, this was in serious danger of hitting a point where it would have to be torn down. And I think it was really great that we were able to progress to what it is today. And there's Marblehead Lighthouse. If you've never been to Marblehead Lighthouse, it's another one I strongly recommend. I believe it's the oldest continually operational lighthouse on Lake Erie. It's beautiful. The views are beautiful. It's right across the water from Cedar Point. If you've never been before, you can come up this year on July 4th. We're doing an event up there for America 250 where we're going to have the Fireland Symphony Orchestra and stuff going on up there for free. And it's a really beautiful place, but they also do tours. We work with a local friends group that, you can see some of the original lenses, the boats that the lighthouse keeper would have used, boat and oars, and a lot of artifacts and materials and written content, some of the original lighthouse keeper logs and stuff like that. It's a really interesting, really well curated tour. I don't know if you guys have worked with fringe groups that can be hit and miss because they're all very passionate, but they have different levels of resources and experience. This is one that really does it very, very well. So again, another place I would love to recommend you visit sometime. But by working with these structures, repurposing them into something that is publicly accessible has helped us to be able to preserve them, to bring attention to them, to bring funding into them, to be able to preserve them or renovate them so that people can experience them in the most original condition that we're able to keep them in. So, nothing's ever perfect, but I think it's really great that we've been able to, as a state and as an agency, to turn these into public facing sites that people can go to learn and to just see how beautiful they are. The New Deal era sites. We're currently in a capital project right now to try to do some restoration on some of these sites that we're starting to show serious signs of wear and tear from the 1930s. It's mostly civilian conservation corps, though we do have a handful that were built by the WPA or some of the other alphabet soup organizations from the Roosevelt administration there. These are both pictures from Mohican State Park, the Mohican Gorge Overlook, which some people don't know was built by the CCC. That's all Civilian Conservation Corps stonework, and the retaining walls leading up to it as well. So here they've been removing some of the stones that have had the faces popped off of them. What's happened over the years with a lot of these CCC stonework structures is people have trying to do the right thing. People have repaired them, and they've repaired them with modern mortar that expands and contracts differently than the kind of ad hoc mortar that they used then. And what happens when if you've got the face extending a little beyond the mortar line, as that expands and contracts, it pops the face off the rock. Yeah, and it's a major issue. You'll see it all over the place with old stonework that people have. They're really trying. They're like, this. It looks like this needs to be repaired. They just don't know that they need a special type of mortar to be able to work with that type of stonework. So we're trying to do some repairs there. Mohican, John Bryan, a handful of other sites that are going to be getting some repair work, and then hopefully we can pursue further capital funding to keep that going, because the Civilian Conservation Corps in particular is such a huge piece of Ohio's heritage. So much of the infrastructure of our public system was built by them. If you go to Hocking Hills, most people in Ohio visited Hocking Hills sometime. All of those stone steps at Old Man's Cave and at Rock House, all those were chiseled by hand or with pneumatic hammers. Yeah, some of them were really getting worn. The old stone bridges, retaining walls. That place looks the way it does today. That iconic look of Hocking Hills, one of the most visited state parks in the whole country. That iconic look is a result of the way the Civilian Conservation Corps function and their park rustic style. And then collaboration. One of the other big ways that we work to preserve and interpret history is through collaboration, building relationships with community partners. And I think doing this also ensures best practices and accountability. When you're doing something all on your own, let's say you're working with Native American history, African American history, and you're doing it all on your own, it's easy to be unaccountable and to make errors, mistakes that don't reflect the history and values of those communities. But when you get partners, you're able to address those things in really productive ways. So we'll talk a little more about Great Council again with tribal coordination that has been taking place and is still taking place out there, and a little about our coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office. I think we're doing good. And we'll move through this really quickly because there's something I really want to get to. I don't want to run out of time. So when we were building Great Council, right from the beginning, we involved the 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribal out of Oklahoma. So there's the Eastern Shawnee, the Shawnee Nation, and the Absentee Shawnee. Those are all different groups of Shawnee that ended up in Oklahoma at different times in different ways. They were in different places at different times. The Shawnee were very big travelers all over the country through their history. But we worked with them from early on in acquiring the property, naming it, design concepts, content creation. They were involved in every aspect. They came and visited multiple times. Everything would go through them before it came back to us so that they could review content. We'd go back and forth. They'd be like, we don't particularly love this. We'd be like, this is why we want to do this. And we could have those conversations as a back and forth where we were equal partners, able to make decisions together. And one of the results of that collaboration is really cool. I think it'll eventually be moving somewhere else and replaced with another exhibit. But in the basement is an exhibit space that we're hoping will host exhibits temporarily. And the one that has been there since it opened is one that we produced in concert with the Ohio History Connection and the Shawnee in Oklahoma, which is about tribal identity, both past, present, and future. And one of the things that it includes is a lot of portraits of current Shawnee, just regular people. I mean, you've got some of the Chief Ben Barnes and some of these other people from the tribe included, but also just regular people that live on the reservation or off, working regular jobs, talking about and then some of their words about what it means to be Shawnee to them in this day and age. It's really powerful. It's really humanizing. I think it's really interesting for kids, especially. It's not maybe the most exciting exhibit for kids, but like my children, no matter how many times I try to explain it to them, still are not entirely sure that there are still Native Americans in America. They're like, well, but they're all gone. Like, no, they're not. they're very much still here. And this is a way of really driving that home, that just because people have, that their cultures and customs have integrated some of ours does not mean that they are not still here and that they're not still a very unique class of people. And so I think this is a really great thing that came out of that conversation. We're also currently working on nailing down a bid that we talked to them about it. They've had say in this too, to do some non-invasive archaeology on the site, a full LiDAR magnetomic survey of the location to see if we see post holes or refuse piles or anything that might provide any further research potential. And then at that point, if we do find something, then there'll be another conversation. Do we just want to know that it's there and we're going to leave it alone now, which is a completely acceptable way to approach that? It is also their history. Or do we want to do a core sample and see if there's something down there worth going a little farther with? Do we want to invite a field school out and work with indigenous interns being brought into that field school so that they can learn the craft of archaeology while exploring their own history? I know that we are working to try to get indigenous interns out to work on the survey, the non-invasive survey as well. It's one of the things we required any company putting in a bid to put in their bid was how they would incorporate indigenous interns into the project. So we're excited to see what comes of that. Maybe we'll find nothing. Maybe we'll find something. We also coordinate with SHPO as needed with the State Historic Preservation Office. If we're working with federal funds on a historic site, then you need to do Section 106 reviews. If there are findings of potential disturbance, you need to have remediation plans. If we're going to work at a historic site at all, we typically consult them. SHPO can also get involved from time to time on environmental reviews, which is interesting because the process of doing an environmental review and of doing like a Section 106 review are very similar. And a lot of times they can kind of get involved in some of those too. And they can also help you determine if something that is on your property is, would be likely to get granted a place on the National Register or something like that. So they can help you determine what level of historical significance a site or structure or I found a little bit of stonework here. Is this historically significant? Should we try to preserve this? They're great at helping out with stuff like that. The picture here is the Harding cabin, which was a cabin that was owned by a friend of President Harding's. It's at Deer Creek State Park near Circleville, south of Columbus. And it's a place that President Harding is rumored to have stayed regularly, kind of a retreat cabin for him and some of his buddies. It was owned by one of his friends during his administration. It is also a rentable space. Beautiful, beautiful interior. It's also a rentable overnight cabin currently. The roof needs replaced. And so right now I'm actually working on a form with SHPO to talk about, do we need to go back to cedar shake? Could we go with composite shingle? What are we needing to do there? Because there's a big difference in price between cedar shake and composite shingle. Here's the topic that I really feel passionate about that I wanted to talk about today, though, is nature itself as historical preservation. One of the greatest sources of cultural connection, in my opinion, between us, our future, and our past, even our deep past, is nature itself. Being able to walk out into something that has not been significantly changed in however many, 60 years, 100 years, 200 years, allows you to connect in a really different, really visceral way with your ancestors, the ancestors of those who have inhabited this space, before you and around you. And it's just it's a different experience, in my opinion, being able to walk in an old growth forest, to see a prairie remnant, to look at a dark sky, just a really special way of connecting with the past. And especially with the deep past, like the dark sky. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's something that we do as part of our general mission, is trying to preserve some of these spaces. It wasn't something that we did as a historical preservation, but when I look at our nature preserves, I think that's one of the greatest pieces of historical preservation that we could possibly do. It's really exciting for me to talk a little bit about that before we close up here. So cultural connections, preserving ecological knowledge requires preserving ecological spaces. We'll talk a little bit about our geological survey, natural areas and preserves, ecology and biology, and dark skies. So this is the Glacial Grooves Geological Preserve on Kelly's Island that preserves a big remaining remnant of glacial grooves from the retreat of the Ice Age glaciers. And this is the geologic survey. I think this picture is from the 70s or 80s, doing core sampling, pouring cores out. And they actually have a state repository of core samples that's housed up near Alum Creek State Park at the Collins lab and classroom up there. But the geological survey does a lot. They map groundwater levels over time. They map our geological compositions, things that again are important for understanding the past, understanding farming techniques. In our prehistory, requires a deep understanding of the geological formation of those areas, things like that. So I think they do a lot of work that's really important, especially in an academic way, for people to connect with the past. Our natural areas and preserves. Not only are they some of the most beautiful places in Ohio, they do really important conservation work, both natural conservation and by proxy, historic conservation. If you go to Johnson Woods, is an old growth forest up, I want to say Sandusky County, Johnson Woods, old growth forest. It's beautiful. You can see that's a very large tree. There's quite a bit of it that is off screen there. There's also Houston Woods has a beautiful old growth forest that was preserved by a man who was a soldier with I think he was with Clark. Who passed through the area and then later came back. And when he was building his farm, he set aside an area of forest that he didn't cut or plow, and instructed his descendants not to. And when he passed away, some people in Ohio banded together to preserve that and eventually to get it transferred to the state. And it's still preserved there at Houston Woods. Also, some of the best remnants of prairie that exist in Ohio exist at a couple places called Smith Pioneer Cemetery and Bigelow Pioneer Cemetery, which are two places that weren't plowed because they were used as burial grounds. And so they have still preserved a lot of that ecology from the early settlement times. And they also preserve the history of the people who settled here, and had their cemetery here and lived and died in these spaces. And those ones are both explicitly and implicitly doing important historical conservation work. Conserving a prairie is historical conservation. And then Black Hand Gorge, another beautiful place that preserves some of the most interesting geology in the state of Ohio, in the Black Hand Sandstone, which is the same formation that stretches down into the Hocking Hills. Then our ecology and biology, also historical preservation, preserving animals, preserving plants, is part of understanding our history. So some examples, the bald eagle was nearly extinct in the state of Ohio 40 years ago. We have a healthy, thriving population now due to the efforts of individuals, nonprofits, Division of Wildlife. A lot of people have worked really hard to bring bald eagles back and healthy in Ohio. We have a lot of nesting pairs now, and it's really exciting to see those populations. That they're such a cool bird to see. River otters, we're working really hard, still diligently to try to grow that population, but they are in Ohio wild again. There's some not too far from here. I know there are some river otters in the Lake Hope area. You guys may know the best place close by to see them, but they're there. It's another great way to be able to preserve history, is to protect, best if you can protect an animal or plant before it is extirpated from an area. But if you can't, working to try to bring it back is another great way to be able to preserve something that is culturally significant and is part of our heritage. The people that walked this land, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, they saw bald eagles, they saw, otters, they saw beaver, they saw things that a lot of us have not seen as much of, and that were in danger or are in danger of the next generation or the next generation not seeing at all. So to connect to those people that came before us, I think it's important to try to preserve as much of what they experienced as we can. And part of that is with animals and plants. And another example is the lakeside daisy. The lakeside daisy is a critically endangered flower that really only grows a few places in like Michigan, I think maybe Pennsylvania, a place or two, and on the Marblehead Peninsula in Ohio. So there's a place called Lakeside Daisy Preserve that exists primarily for the purpose of protecting the population of the lakeside daisy. Dark skies, I think this is my last topic. I think we're about ready to go to questions. I think dark skies are another thing that is in danger of vanishing, has in large part vanished from our country and our planet, even in large sections of our planet. True dark skies where you can really experience what it would have looked like 1,000 years ago to step outside at night before there was artificial light, before the population was so high. Again, so much of our cosmology, our shared cosmology throughout history, from the Greek, from the Native Americans, from Chinese history, so much of our shared cosmology is crafted around what we saw in the sky: comets, constellations, planets, and we're losing that, piece by piece. Two things that to some extent is something, some of it you can't prevent it. It's part of the changing of the world. But there are things that can be done to increase to decrease light pollution, to impact dark skies. And I think it's really important in Ohio in particular, if we look at like the Hopewell culture that is part of our heritage, was so intimately connected to the cycles of the moon and the sun. And I think if we can, it's important that our children, our children's children, their children are able to have places that they can go out and see an unadulterated, as much as possible, night sky, and be able to connect. It's one of the only things, it's one of the slowest changing things that you can possibly connect with in the entire world, is the constellations, the universe around us, as opposed to even old growth forests and things like that trees die and they fall, they live, a few hundred years, whatever. We can look at constellations and sky and the sky in a way that looks virtually unchanged from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. There are changes, but they happen so slowly that what we're seeing is so similar to what our ancestors saw. I think it's a really important part of preserving our culture. This beautiful picture is from the John Glenn Astronomy Park at Hocking Hills. And this is a really cool thing at the New Nature Center at Cedar Creek. Their naturalist is really passionate about dark skies, and they're working on trying to get designated as a international dark skies park. And they have a night room in their New Nature Center. And I think, yeah, that's got rid of the wine again. But yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for coming. That was some of the things that I could have gone into more and more examples, but I wanted to make sure we had some time to talk, and I came close to hitting my 45-minute goal. So thank you guys so much for coming. Let's chat.
Where is it? Caesar Park.
Cedar Creek State Park is in between Dayton and Cincinnati, kind of near Wilmington. It's, if any of you are familiar with the Renaissance Festival, the Renaissance Fair, the Ohio Renaissance Fair, it's directly across the road from there. There's Waynesville. Yeah. Like I said, we can talk about preservation. We can talk about Ohio State parks. We can talk about general history. I'm just happy to be here and chat with
Can
you
you
guys.
talk a little bit about the IMAX movie that I had an opportunity to see? It's
Yes,
last fall.
I can
I know
talk a
that,
little about it.
It's not. There weren't really any locations for the scenes that were kind of close to us in Appalachian, Ohio. So whatever.
I think- I believe AMC was the theater group that they managed to get a contract with to play it in their theaters. So if there's not an AMC like IMAX or large screen theater nearby, it is going to be more difficult. I anticipate it living somewhere online as well, but that wouldn't be the same experience as seeing it in the IMAX. I will admit I haven't actually seen it on IMAX. I reviewed it multiple times when we were in production. My colleague Alyssa Yapel was kind of a leader on that, and director Merch herself was highly involved with that. But it's a film that it weaves some history into it. It talks kind of about just the experiencing the outdoors and nature in Ohio, and how that ties to kind of the history of conservation, and how that ties to how individuals feel about it. So they have different, they interview a few different people. They talk a little bit about the Cuyahoga River fires and how that helped spur the EPA, and about the immense changes that Ohio, and most places, but that Ohio has gone through in the past 200 years. When Europeans first traveled through Ohio, one of the earliest diaries we have of someone that traveled between the lake and the river discusses it as one vast unbroken forest. Some estimates are as high as 95% forest cover for the state of Ohio in 1800. By 1900, we were down to like 8 or 10%, 8% forest cover in the state of Ohio. Some counties, the only trees in the entire county were what were considered agricultural use trees. So they were either trees that had been planted for agriculture, or they were fence line trees, or shade trees for horses, things like that. They were the only trees that existed in the entire county. Some of the most depressing things I've ever read have been the reports of the first state forester in Ohio. We're back up into like the high 20s now. But it talks some about those changes and how over time people came to see progress in different ways, and wanted to bring back some of that nature, wanted to bring back some of the forest, bring back some of the animals that have been extirpated, and some of the things that we've done to, as a state, as a people, to work towards that. And it is a visually really beautiful film. Ohio Wild at Heart.
Narrated by Archie Griffin.
Yeah,
It goes all over the place. It's really.
they got Archie Griffin to narrate it. He did a great job. When they told me he was going to be narrating, I was like, interesting, Archie Griffin, and he did a really great job. I think he lends a great piece to it. And they interview one of my favorite people in the entire world, Jenny Richards, the naturalist at Shawnee State Park, who's spectacular and one of the most passionate people in our entire system when it comes to just talking about Ohio's nature. So it's really great. It's a really great video.
Well, with any tools,
I,
access to it in this part.
I will let you know. I'll see if there's anything any ideas. I know the director at ODNR and Governor DeWine are both very conscious of. It doesn't always result in them being able to do something with it, but they're both very conscious of the limitations in Southeastern Ohio of being able to, of things that get pushed out very easily into Central Ohio and Southwest Ohio and to Cleveland, Toledo, that are much harder to get pushed out and roll out in Southeastern Ohio. And I think they are both very conscious of that disparity and do make conscious efforts to try to address that at times. I know that a lot of the we distribute a lot of grant funding for infrastructure projects to Southeastern Ohio communities, especially the Ambler abandoned minelands reclamation projects. Of course, that's primarily going to go to Southeastern Ohio because that's where the abandoned minelands mostly are. But yeah.
What is your background? What did you major in college?
So my degrees are in history and public administration, both from Ohio University. I grew up just outside of Athens, small town of Albany. My family still lives there. I moved back there when I spent some time, went to college, didn't like it very much. Moved to the West Coast, lived in Seattle for several years. Came back, went back to school. Spent some time working in after school programs. Most recently, before I went to ODNR, I was working in after school programs out of Federal Hawken School District for Ohio University. Then I ended up in this job, and I really enjoy it. I think it's been great, and I think it's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
So, anyone else have any questions? Anything just about ODNR history or about Ohio history? Anything that this is the thing I've been thinking about today, I'd like to talk about, or questions are the best part. I don't know if they have the capability of asking questions online,
That's
but if there's
correct.
any from there,
I've
I'll be
seen it
happy
there.
to take those as well.
We do have 30 some people watching.
Great.
We've had a total of 111 views.
Very nice. Very nice. It's exciting. Like I said, we pushed it out to all of my coworkers at ODNR with the capability to hop on and view some of it too. So I hope some of them got to as well.
I know you talked about reintroducing wildlife.
Mhm.
Okay. We're going to also reintroduce as far as their natural habitat, as far as vegetation. and
So-
plant bases that they use.
I think that's an important conversation when it comes to reintroducing. You don't want to set a population up to fail. The animals are for lack of a better term, the animals are the sexy part. The elk, the eagles, look how beautiful this thing is. But you don't want to set it up to fail by introducing it into an environment that A, can't sustain it, or B, that it will damage. The current deer herd can really cause a lot of ecological damage. The carrying capacity of an eastern woodland is only so high, and in large parts of the state, our deer herd drastically exceeds that carrying capacity, which leads directly to things like we have seen this year with the disease. So I know that there are people at the Division of Wildlife who consider that when they're talking about reintroduction and stuff. They're not the only decision makers, so there's kind of a balance between our folks at ODNR giving the most sound research-backed advice we can to to legislatures and special interest groups. And those groups have things that they want to see, and trying to find that balance and, make it work for everyone. I would love to see elk in Ohio. I don't know if Ohio is prepared for elk. I do not think that wild bison, free roaming wild bison, is a good idea for Ohio. It is something people have mentioned, and I don't work at the Division of Wildlife. I'm not an expert on wildlife and habitats. Maybe I'm completely wrong. It's just I imagine one crossing the road in front of my car. I think my entire car would just disintegrate, and the bison would probably be fine. I have a very small car. But yeah, that's a more complicated question that I think I'd be happy to give you my email and put you in touch with people that could give you a more thoughtful answer on that than I can. If there's no other questions, guys, I really appreciate you coming out today, braving the snowstorm and coming out and listening to me prattle for a while.
Thank you.